The sound of breaking glass stopped everyone in the Silver Dollar Saloon cold, and Winnie Blackwood felt 20 pairs of eyes lock onto her as she stood frozen, the shattered remains of a whiskey bottle at her feet. It wasn't the first time she dropped something this week, but it might well be the last straw for Mr. Hoffman, who was already approaching with his face flushed crimson beneath his mustache. "That's it, Winnie," he bellowed, hands on his hips. "I gave you a chance when nobody else would, but you're just too old for this kind of work. A woman your age should be tending grandchildren, not serving drinks to cowboys and miners." Winnie felt her cheeks burn. At 36, she was hardly ancient, but in Silverton, Colorado in 1882, an unmarried woman her age was considered well past her prime. The fact that she'd never married or had children only made her more of an oddity. "Mr. Hoffman, please," she said, already reaching for the broom. "It was just an accident. I'll pay for the bottle." "It's not about the bottle," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "The men come here for young, pretty faces, not—" He gestured vaguely at her. "I need someone who brings in business, not drives it away." The saloon had gone awkwardly quiet. Winnie felt a lump forming in her throat as she clutched the broom handle, knuckles turning white. 5 years she'd worked here, ever since arriving in Silverton with nothing but a small trunk and fading dreams. "You'll have your final pay at the end of the night, mister," Hoffman said, already turning away. "And I expect you'll be out of the room upstairs by tomorrow noon." The room upstairs. The tiny space she called home. Winnie nodded mutely, fighting to maintain her composure as she swept up the broken glass. The conversations around her slowly resumed, but she could feel the sideways glances, hear the whispers. "Too old. Should have settled down years ago. What'll she do now?" That last question echoed in her own mind as she finished her final shift, counting out the meager tips that wouldn't last more than a week. The mining town of Silverton had limited options for a woman alone, especially one deemed too old for saloon work. As she trudged up the stairs to her room that night, exhaustion weighed on her shoulders like a physical burden. She'd have to leave Silverton, try her luck elsewhere. Maybe Denver. But the thought of starting over again, in a new city where she knew no one, made her want to sink to the floor and weep. Instead, she began packing her few belongings by lamplight, folding each dress carefully as if the neatness of her trunk could somehow bring order to the chaos of her life. A knock at her door startled her. It was well past midnight. "Who is it?" she called warily. "It's Grace from down the hall. Got something for you." Winnie opened the door to find the young saloon girl holding out a folded newspaper. "Saw this earlier," Grace said. "Thought it might interest you. What with? You know." Winnie took the paper with a grateful nod. After Grace left, she unfolded it to find a section circled in charcoal. An advertisement, housekeeper wanted. Respectable woman needed to manage household on cattle ranch outside Durango. Room, board, and fair wages offered. Must be good with children. Apply in person to Garrett Donovan, Diamond D Ranch. Durango was less than 50 miles away. She could afford the stagecoach fare and housekeeping that she could do. Winnie fell asleep that night with the newspaper clutched to her chest. A tiny flicker of hope rekindled. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of crisp autumn day that painted the surrounding mountains in vibrant golds and reds. Winnie collected her final pay, said her goodbyes to the few friendly faces, and boarded the southbound stagecoach to Durango with her trunk and the clothes on her back. The journey was dusty and jarring, the coach packed with miners, a traveling salesman, and a mother with a fussy baby. Winnie held the infant while the exhausted mother napped, rocking him gently and humming softly until his eyes drifted closed. "You've got a way with little ones," the salesman commented, watching her. Winnie smiled faintly. "Never had any of my own, but I've always loved children." "Shame," he said, with the casual cruelty of a stranger making conversation. "Pretty woman like you should have had a husband and a houseful." She turned her gaze to the passing landscape, the familiar ache in her chest. How many times had she heard variations of that sentiment? As if her value as a woman could only be measured in matrimony and motherhood, Durango bustled with activity when they arrived, the town larger and more prosperous than Silverton. Winnie secured a room at a modest boarding house, stretching her dwindling funds, Diamond D Ranch. The proprietress said when Winnie inquired about the advertisement, "That's Garrett Donovan's place, about 5 miles north of town, widower with 3 boys, 3 boys," Winnie echoed, lost his wife about 2 years back, childbirth. The youngest, he's just turned 2. The woman looked Winnie up and down. "You thinking of applying for the position?" "Yes," Winnie said, straightening her shoulders. "I am." "Well, he's been through 4 housekeepers already. Those boys are a handful, especially the oldest, just so you know what you're walking into." Winnie thanked her for the information and spent the evening mending a small tear in her best dress. She'd walk out to the ranch tomorrow. 5 miles wasn't so far, and it would save the expense of hiring transportation. Dawn found her already on the road, her carpetbag containing a change of clothes and her few personal items. The air was cool and sweet, the road winding through stands of aspen and pine. Despite her uncertain future, Winnie found herself enjoying the walk, the beauty of the landscape lifting her spirits. The Diamond D Ranch announced itself with a large wooden arch over the entrance to the property. Beyond stretched fenced pastures where cattle grazed, and in the distance, Winnie could see a substantial 2-story house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. It was bigger than she'd imagined, and her confidence faltered momentarily. As she approached the house, a boy of about 10 came racing around the corner, pursued by another a few years younger. Both skidded to a halt at the sight of her. "Who are you?" the older boy demanded, his expression suspicious. "My name is Winnie Blackwood," she replied, offering a smile. "I've come about the housekeeper position." The younger boy groaned dramatically. "Another one?" "Hush, Ethan," the older boy scolded. "I'll get Pa." He took off toward the barn without another word. Ethan remained, studying her with undisguised skepticism. "You don't look like the others," he finally said. "Oh, how so?" "You're older," he said bluntly, "and you ain't wearing fancy clothes." Before Winnie could respond to this assessment, the front door opened and a small figure appeared, a toddler with unruly dark curls and a face smeared with what appeared to be jam. "Hello there," Winnie said softly, kneeling to the child's level. The little boy regarded her solemnly before breaking into a sudden, brilliant smile. "That's Henry," Ethan supplied. "He don't talk much yet." Henry toddled toward Winnie, seemingly drawn by her gentle voice. She was about to scoop him up when the sound of approaching footsteps made her look up. A man was striding toward the house from the barn, the older boy trotting alongside him. Winnie rose quickly to her feet, smoothing her dress, suddenly very aware of her travel-worn appearance. Garrett Donovan was tall and broad-shouldered, his face tanned and weathered from years under the Colorado sun. Dark hair streaked with silver at the temples was pushed back from a strong forehead, and his eyes, when they met hers, were a startling blue. "Miss Blackwood." His voice was deep with a slight roughness to it. "Yes, sir, I've come about the housekeeper position." She gestured toward the newspaper in her carpetbag. "I saw your advertisement." He looked her over, much as the proprietress had done, but his gaze was more measuring than judgmental. "You have experience?" "I've worked in a saloon for the past 5 years," she answered honestly. "Before that, I was a seamstress in Denver, and before that, I helped run my father's general store in Missouri until he passed." His eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of the saloon. "What kind of work in the saloon?" "Serving drinks, cleaning, occasional cooking when needed." She lifted her chin. "I'm hard-working, Mr. Donovan, and I'm good with children." As if to prove her point, Henry had wrapped himself around her skirts, peering up at his father with a grin. "Seems Henry's taken a shine to you," Garrett observed. "That's something. He usually hides from strangers." The older boy tugged at his father's sleeve. "Pa, she's old," he whispered, not quite quietly enough, when he felt her cheeks flush. Garrett Donovan's mouth twitched, though whether in amusement or embarrassment was hard to tell. "Samuel," he admonished gently, "mind your manners." He turned back to Winnie. "My apologies, Miss Blackwood. My eldest speaks before he thinks sometimes." "It's quite all right," Winnie said, though the comment stung. "Children are refreshingly honest. Too honest sometimes," Garrett muttered. He seemed to come to a decision. "The position includes room and board, as the advertisement stated. Your duties would involve cooking, cleaning, laundry, and helping with the boys when I'm working with the cattle. The previous housekeeper left rather abruptly, so the place isn't in the best shape." "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Donovan," he nodded slowly. "I can offer $15 a month plus your room and meals." It was a fair wage, better than she'd expected. "That would be acceptable." "There's one more thing," he said, his expression growing more serious. "I need someone who'll stay. These boys have had too much change in their lives already. I can't have someone who'll run off the first time Samuel puts a frog in her bed or Henry has a tantrum." Winnie met his gaze steadily. "Mr. Donovan, I have nowhere else to go, and frankly, after working in a saloon for 5 years, there's little your boys could do that would scare me off." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "We'll see about that." He extended his hand. "You can start today if you're agreeable." Winnie took his hand, noting the calluses and strength in his grip. "I am." And just like that, Winnie Blackwood found herself employed as housekeeper of the Diamond D Ranch with 3 young boys and their widowed father to look after. The first weeks were exhausting. The house had clearly suffered from the lack of consistent care. Dust had accumulated in every corner, the kitchen was disorganized, and the laundry situation was nothing short of overwhelming. Winnie tackled each task methodically, working from dawn until well after dusk. The boys presented their own challenges. Samuel, at 10, was fiercely protective of his father and brothers, viewing Winnie with suspicion and occasionally outright hostility. Ethan, 7, was mischievous but good-natured, alternating between pulling pranks and offering unexpected help. Little Henry, just past his 2nd birthday, attached himself to Winnie almost immediately, following her around the house like a shadow. Garrett Donovan himself remained something of a mystery. He was unfailingly polite but kept his distance, leaving early to work with the cattle and hired hands, returning for meals, and often disappearing into his study in the evenings. Occasionally, Winnie would catch him watching her with his sons, an unreadable expression on his face. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Winnie was in the kitchen preparing supper when she heard the unmistakable sound of breaking glass, followed by a small, frightened wail. She rushed into the parlor to find Henry standing amid the shattered remains of what had been a small porcelain figurine, his little face crumpling in dismay. "Oh, Henry," she sighed, quickly checking to make sure he wasn't hurt. Finding no injuries, she scooped him up and away from the glass. "It's all right, little one. Accidents happen." "That was Ma's," came Samuel's accusatory voice from the doorway. "Pa's going to be so mad." Winnie turned to see the oldest boy staring at the broken pieces, his expression a mixture of anger and distress. "It was an accident, Samuel," she said gently. "I'm sure your father will understand." "You don't know anything," Samuel snapped. "That was special, one of the only things we have left of her." Winnie set Henry down on the sofa away from the glass. "Samuel, just leave it alone." The boy shouted, tears welling in his eyes. "You're not our mother, you'll never be our mother. You're just some old woman nobody else wanted." He bolted from the room, leaving Winnie standing amidst the broken porcelain, Henry's soft whimpers the only sound. She gathered the fragments carefully, wondering if the figurine could possibly be repaired. Henry watched her with wide, worried eyes. "Don't worry," she told him softly. "We'll fix it somehow." Later that evening, after the boys were in bed, Winnie sat at the kitchen table with the broken pieces spread before her, carefully attempting to fit them back together with a small pot of glue she'd found. "What are you doing?" She started at Garrett's voice, not having heard him enter the kitchen. "I'm trying to repair the figurine Henry broke today," she explained, gesturing to the delicate pieces. Samuel said it was his mother's. Garrett moved closer, studying her work. It was a shepherdess. Elizabeth collected them. His voice was quiet, tinged with memory. I'm so sorry it was broken. I should have been watching Henry more carefully. He shook his head. Boys break things. It's what they do. He picked up one of the small pieces, turning it in his fingers. Samuel took it hard, I assume? Yes, she admitted. He said some things. About you not being their mother, Garrett guessed, his eyes meeting hers. Winnie nodded. It's understandable, he misses her. They all do, even Henry, though he doesn't remember her. Garrett set the fragment down carefully. Elizabeth she was everything to us. When she died, it was like the sun went out. The raw grief in his voice made Winnie's heart ache. I can't imagine your loss, Mr. Donovan, but those boys of yours, they're wonderful children. You've done well by them. A rueful smile crossed his face. I don't know about that. I'm fumbling through each day, trying not to make too many mistakes. Aren't we all? Winnie returned his smile. Even those of us without children. You never married, he asked, then seemed to catch himself. Forgive me, that's too personal. It's all right, she said. No, I never did. Not for lack of opportunity when I was younger, but I was waiting for something. Someone. The right person, I suppose, and then suddenly I was too old and the opportunities stopped coming. Garrett's eyes held hers for a long moment. Their loss, he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Winnie couldn't quite name. Then Garrett cleared his throat and rose from his chair. Don't stay up too late with that, he said, nodding toward the broken figurine. Some things can't be fixed perfectly, but they can still be cherished. He left her with those words, and Winnie sat for a long time afterward, wondering if he was still talking about the porcelain shepherdess. The seasons changed, autumn giving way to winter. Snow blanketed the ranch, transforming it into a wonderland that delighted the boys. Inside, the house had been equally transformed under Winnie's care, clean, organized, and increasingly filled with warmth and laughter. Samuel's initial hostility had gradually softened. The turning point came when Winnie discovered his secret love of reading and began setting aside time each evening to help him with particularly challenging books. Ethan blossomed under her attention to his artistic talents, proudly displaying the sketches she encouraged him to create. And Henry Sweet, exuberant Henry, had taken to calling her Winnie Mama when he was particularly sleepy or in need of comfort. As for Garrett, he and Winnie had developed a comfortable rhythm, their initial employer-employee formality giving way to something like friendship. They often sat together in the evenings after the boys were asleep, talking about the day's events or sometimes just enjoying the companionable silence. One such evening, as a December blizzard howled outside, they sat before the fire in the parlor, Winnie mending one of Samuel's shirts while Garrett cleaned his saddle. Christmas is coming, he remarked, his hands working the leather with practiced ease. The boys are getting excited. As they should, Winnie smiled. I've been helping them with secret projects for each other. Ethan is determined to make you something special, though I'm sworn to secrecy about what it is. Garrett chuckled. Last year, he gave me a rock he'd painted to look like a cow. It's still on my desk. That sounds like Ethan. She hesitated, then added, I hope you don't mind that I've been teaching them some Christmas songs. Samuel has quite a good voice. I don't mind at all. Elizabeth used to sing with them. I'm not much for singing myself. Winnie set down her mending. Do you talk about her with them often? Elizabeth? Garrett's hands stilled on the saddle. Not as much as I should, perhaps. It's still difficult. They need to remember her, Winnie said gently. It would be good for them to hear stories about her, to know who she was. He nodded slowly. You're right, it's just, I was afraid that talking about her would make the pain worse. For a time, maybe, but in the long run, I think it helps, keeps her a part of their lives. Garrett studied her face in the firelight. You're a wise woman, Winnie Blackwood. Not wise, she demurred. Just experienced in loss, I suppose. My mother died when I was 12. My father never spoke of her afterward, and I felt like I lost her twice, once to death and once to silence. Without warning, Garrett reached across the space between them and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough against hers. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything you've done for my boys, for this home." Winnie felt her heart flutter in her chest. "It's been my pleasure," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They remained like that for a long moment, hands joined, the crackling fire the only sound in the room. Finally, reluctantly, Garrett released her hand and returned to his work, but something had shifted between them. A door opened that couldn't be closed again. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, the storm having passed days before, leaving a pristine white landscape that glittered in the sunlight. The boys woke at dawn, their excited voices echoing through the house as they raced downstairs to see what Santa had brought. Winnie had been up since before first light, preparing special breakfast treats and arranging the modest gifts she'd purchased or made for each of them. Garrett joined them, his face alight with pleasure at his son's excitement. The small tree they'd cut from the property was decorated with paper chains, pine cones, and a few precious glass ornaments that had belonged to Elizabeth. Beneath it lay parcels wrapped in brown paper and tied with colorful ribbons. "This one's for you, Winnie," Ethan exclaimed, bringing her a small, lumpy package. "From all of us." Surprised, Winnie accepted the gift. "You didn't have to get me anything." "We wanted to," Samuel said, his usual reticence melting into a shy smile. "Open it." Inside the package was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. Winnie gasped softly as she lifted it from the wrapping. "It was Ma's," Samuel explained. "Pa said we could give it to you." "It's beautiful," Winnie whispered, deeply touched. "But I couldn't possibly. Elizabeth would have wanted you to have it," Garrett said quietly. "Open it." With trembling fingers, Winnie pressed the tiny clasp. Inside was a miniature portrait of the three boys, their faces serious but their eyes bright. "So we're always with you," Ethan said proudly. Tears pricked at Winnie's eyes. "This is the most precious gift I've ever received," she told them, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." Henry climbed into her lap, reaching for the locket. "Pretty," he declared, "for Winnie Mama." Samuel didn't correct his little brother this time, just watched as Winnie fastened the locket around her neck, her heart too full for words. The day passed in a blur of joy and celebration. They ate the special breakfast Winnie had prepared, opened the remaining gifts, and spent the afternoon playing in the snow. As dusk fell, they gathered around the piano that had stood silent since Elizabeth's death, and Winnie played the Christmas carols she'd been teaching the boys, their voices rising together in the warm parlor. Later, after the children were finally asleep, exhausted from the day's excitement, Winnie found herself alone with Garrett on the front porch. Despite the cold, the night was beautiful, stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamond dust. "I have something for you," Garrett said, producing a small package from his coat pocket. "Another gift, but you've already given me so much." Her fingers touched the locket at her throat. "This is different." There was a nervousness to his manner she'd never seen before. "Open it." Inside the package was a small, leather-bound book. Winnie opened it to find blank pages. "A journal," she guessed. Garrett nodded. I hoped you might use it to write down our story, yours and mine and the boys, the story of the Diamond D." Winnie looked up at him, confused. "I don't understand." He took a deep breath. "Winnie, when you came here, I was just looking for someone to keep house and help with the boys. I never expected." He paused, searching for words. "You've brought life back to this home, to me." Her heart began to pound. "Garrett, let me finish," he said gently. "I know I'm not offering you what a young woman might want. I'm a widower with 3 wild boys, a ranch that demands constant work and my own fair share of stubbornness. But I care for you, Winnie, deeply. And if you could see your way to staying, not as our housekeeper, but as my wife, as a mother to my sons." Winnie's breath caught in her throat. "People will talk," she said softly. "They'll say I'm too old for you, that you could have had someone younger, prettier. Let them talk," Garrett interrupted, taking her hands in his. "I don't want someone younger or prettier. I want you, Winnie Blackwood, with your wisdom and your kindness and your incredible strength." I want the woman who fixed a broken shepherdess and taught my oldest son to love books again. The woman who makes Ethan believe his art matters and who Henry calls Mama when he's sleepy." His voice lowered. "The woman I've fallen in love with." Tears spilled onto Winnie's cheeks. "Are you certain?" Truly certain, in answer, Garrett drew her into his arms and kissed her, his lips warm despite the winter chill. Winnie melted against him, her heart soaring with a joy she'd never thought to experience. When they finally parted, both breathless, Garrett pressed his forehead to hers. "Is that certain enough for you?" Winnie laughed, a sound of pure happiness. "It's a start," she teased, "but I might need more convincing." "I have a lifetime to convince you," he promised, his arms tightening around her. "Say you'll stay, Winnie, say you'll be my wife." Under a sky full of stars, with the Diamond D Ranch spread out before them and the future stretching bright and hopeful ahead, Winnie gave him her answer. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Forever." Spring came early that year, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots pushing through the soil. The Diamond D Ranch buzzed with activity as cattle were moved to fresh pastures and fields were prepared for planting. In the large farmhouse, another kind of preparation was underway. Winnie stood in what had once been the spare bedroom, now transformed into a warm and inviting space for her and Garrett. Her wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of cream-colored silk, hung on the wardrobe door, ready for tomorrow's ceremony. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Winnie." Samuel's voice called from the hallway. "Can I come in?" "Of course," she answered, smiling as the boy entered, looking unusually serious in his freshly pressed Sunday shirt. "Pa sent me to check if you need anything," he said, then hesitated. "And I wanted to ask you something." "What is it, Samuel?" He fidgeted with the button on his sleeve. "After tomorrow, when you and Pa are married, what should I call you?" Winnie's heart squeezed with tenderness. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," she said gently. "Winnie is fine, or Miss Winnie if you prefer." Samuel considered this, his young face thoughtful. "Ethan and Henry call you Ma sometimes." "They do," she acknowledged. "But you're older and you remember your mother. I would never try to replace her, Samuel. Never." "I know," he said quietly, "but I've been thinking. Maybe I could call you Mother. It's different from Ma, but it still means family." Tears pricked at Winnie's eyes. "I would be honored, Samuel, truly honored," the boy nodded, looking relieved. "Good, that's settled then." He turned to go, then paused at the door. "One more thing." "Yes, I'm glad Pa picked you," he said simply, "even if you are old." Winnie laughed through her tears as Samuel disappeared down the hallway, his mission accomplished. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the kind of day that seemed created specifically for new beginnings. Friends and neighbors from the surrounding ranches gathered in the meadow beside the house, where wildflowers had been scattered among the simple wooden benches. Garrett waited at the front, his 3 sons standing proudly beside him, all 4 Donovan males dressed in their finest. When Winnie appeared, walking slowly toward them on the arm of Garrett's foreman, who had gladly stepped in to give the bride away, a hush fell over the assembly. At 36, Winnie Blackwood was not a young bride, but as she moved toward her future husband, her face luminous with happiness, not a single person present could deny her beauty. The silver locket gleamed at her throat, catching the sunlight. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Garrett gathered Winnie into his arms for a kiss that drew cheers and applause from the guests, none louder than from his 3 sons. The celebration continued well into the evening, with food and dancing and laughter filling the ranch. As twilight fell, Winnie found herself standing slightly apart from the festivities, watching as Garrett swung little Henry in his arms to the music. "Mrs. Donovan," a voice said beside her, and she turned to find Samuel and Ethan approaching. "Mother," Samuel added, trying out the new title. "Boys," she greeted them warmly. "Are you enjoying the party?" "It's the best day ever," Ethan declared. "And we got you something, a wedding present." From behind his back, Samuel produced a small, carefully wrapped package. "We made it ourselves," he explained. "Well, mostly." Inside was a wooden picture frame, clearly crafted by childish hands but with care and love. It held a photograph of the three boys, their faces scrubbed clean and serious, dressed in their Sunday best. "It's for your bedside table," Ethan said, "so you see us first thing every morning." "It's perfect," Winnie told them, her heart overflowing. "Absolutely perfect. There's space in the frame," Samuel pointed out, "for when we have more brothers or sisters." Winnie blushed at the boy's forthrightness. "Well, that's something your father and I will have to discuss." "He wants more," Ethan confided. "He told us." Before Winnie could respond to this revelation, Garrett appeared with Henry still in his arms. "What are you three plotting?" he asked, eyeing his sons with mock suspicion. "Nothing, Pa," Samuel said innocently. "Just giving Mother her wedding present." Garrett's face softened at Samuel's use of the word mother. He looked at Winnie, his eyes full of love. "And did you like your gift, Mrs. Donovan?" "Very much," she replied, showing him the frame. "Though I hear there might be plans for expanding the family portrait in the future." Garrett's ears reddened slightly, but he didn't look away. "If you're agreeable," he said softly, "there's plenty of room in this house and in my heart." Winnie stood on tiptoe to kiss him, mindful of Henry watching with wide eyes. "I'm very agreeable, Mr. Donovan." As the stars began to appear in the deepening blue of the sky, the newly formed family made their way back to the celebration, Winnie's hand firmly clasped in Garrett's, the boys running ahead. Behind them, the Diamond D Ranch stretched vast and beautiful, a kingdom of possibilities. For a woman once deemed too old, whose dreams had seemed to fade with each passing year, life had revealed its most extraordinary surprise: that love could find you at any age, that family could be formed from the broken pieces of the past, and that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings came disguised as endings. As Garrett pulled her close for another kiss, Winnie knew with absolute certainty that she had found her forever home.